Victoria Sterling slammed her fist on the table so hard the champagne glasses shattered. "Get him out of my sight," she said. But the man sitting across from her didn't flinch. He didn't stand. He didn't blink. He just looked at her, this single father in a borrowed suit, and said 5 words that broke the most powerful woman in New York. What he said changed everything. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why the people who laughed at them never laughed again. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. The call came at 4:47 in the morning. Victoria Sterling was already awake. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours in years. Sleep was something she traded away a long time ago, along with friendships, patience, and anything resembling a normal life. Her phone buzzed on the marble countertop of her penthouse kitchen. She picked it up without looking at the name. "What?" "Victoria, it's Richard. We have a problem." Richard Calloway was her chief financial officer. He was 56 years old, had worked on Wall Street for 3 decades, and Victoria had watched him sweat through his shirt during a hostile takeover 2 years ago. She trusted him with numbers. She didn't trust him with anything else. "What kind of problem?" she asked. "The Whitmore acquisition. Their legal team filed an injunction at midnight. They're trying to block the merger." Victoria set her coffee down. "They can't block it. We closed the terms last Thursday. They're claiming we misrepresented projected revenue in the disclosure documents. They've got a judge in Delaware willing to hear it." Victoria closed her eyes, not because she was tired, because she was calculating. Which judge? Henderson. Henderson owes Whitmore's chairman a favor from the Parkfield settlement. That's why they filed in Delaware. Silence on the other end. "Get Marcus on the phone," Victoria said. "Tell him I want our legal response filed before the market opens. And Richard, yes. If this costs us the merger, I'm not losing a deal. I'm losing you. Understood?" She hung up before he could answer. That was Victoria Sterling, 48 years old, self-made, worth $4.7 billion. She had taken over Sterling Industries from her father when she was 29 years old. At that time, the company was drowning in debt, bleeding clients, and 6 months away from bankruptcy. Her father, William Sterling, had built the company in the 1970s and spent the next 40 years slowly destroying it through bad investments, worse partnerships, and a gambling habit he hid from everyone except his accountant. When he finally admitted the truth to Victoria, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She sat in his office, looked at the numbers, and said, "Give me the company." Her father laughed. "You're 29 years old, Victoria. You don't know the first thing about running a... You're $63 million in debt. You've lost 4 of your 6 major clients. Your board is planning to remove you next quarter. And your accountant, Gerald, has been skimming from the pension fund for the last 7 years. Her father's face went white. "How do you know about Gerald?" "Because I pay attention. Something you stopped doing a long time ago." William Sterling signed over control of the company the following week. Within 2 years, Victoria fired half the executive team, restructured every division, renegotiated contracts that her father had been too afraid to touch, and brought Sterling Industries back from the edge. Within 5 years, she tripled the company's value. Within 10 years, she had turned a dying family business into one of the most powerful investment firms in North America. The newspapers gave her a name, the Iron Queen. She hated it, not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. Victoria had become exactly what the name described: cold, efficient, untouchable. She had no close friends. She had associates. She had no romantic relationships. She had arrangements. She had no hobbies, no vacations, no lazy Sunday mornings. She had spreadsheets, conference calls, and an executive assistant named Claire, who had lasted longer than any of the others 4 years, mostly because Claire had learned never to ask Victoria a personal question. But there was one thing the newspapers didn't know. One thing nobody knew. Victoria Sterling had been married once. His name was James Whitfield. They met when Victoria was 31, right in the middle of rebuilding her father's company. James was a corporate attorney, tall, charming, intelligent. He understood her world. He spoke her language. And for a brief time, Victoria believed she had found someone who could keep up with her. They married quickly. A small ceremony. No guests except lawyers and a judge. It lasted 3 years. Not because James was a bad man. He wasn't. He was kind, he was patient, and he genuinely loved her. But Victoria couldn't stop. She couldn't turn off the part of her brain that was always calculating, always strategizing, always 3 moves ahead. She brought spreadsheets to dinner. She took phone calls during their anniversary. She canceled vacations because a deal was closing. One night, James sat across from her at their dining table. She was on her laptop. He had cooked dinner. She hadn't touched it. "Victoria." "1 second. "Victoria, please look at me." She didn't look up. "I'm listening." "No, you're not. You haven't listened to me in 2 years. She finally closed the laptop. "What do you need, James?" He stared at her for a long time. "I need you to tell me one thing about my day. Anything. Something I told you this morning. Something I mentioned last week. Anything that proves you know I exist outside of this apartment." Victoria opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She couldn't remember. She couldn't remember a single thing he had said that week, or the week before, or the month before. James stood up. "That's what I thought." He filed for divorce the next morning. Victoria didn't fight it. She didn't cry. She went to the office and closed a $700 million acquisition before lunch. And she never spoke about James again. That was 7 years ago. Now at 48, Victoria lived alone in a penthouse that cost more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. She ate dinner alone. She watched the city lights alone. She went to sleep when she slept it all alone. And every morning she woke up and did the only thing she knew how to do. She won. The charity gala was Margaret Ashford's idea. Margaret was 62 years old, married to a hedge fund manager, and considered herself one of Victoria's closest friends. In reality, Margaret was afraid of Victoria, fascinated by her, and deeply jealous of her all at the same time. Margaret had a habit of organizing elaborate charity events, not because she cared about charity, but because she enjoyed watching powerful people interact in controlled environments. She liked drama, she liked gossip, and most of all, she liked feeling superior to people who had more money than her but less social grace. Victoria was her favorite target. "She's impossible," Margaret said to her husband Gregory 3 weeks before the gala. "She shows up to every event, sits in a corner, intimidates everyone at her table, and leaves before dessert." Gregory didn't look up from his newspaper. "Then stop inviting her." "I can't stop inviting her. She donated $2 million last year. She's the biggest name on the guest list." "Then what's the problem?" Margaret smiled. "The problem is that Victoria Sterling thinks she's better than everyone, and I think it's time someone reminded her that she's not." Gregory lowered his newspaper. "Margaret, I've seen you do a lot of things I didn't approve of, but if you're thinking about embarrassing Victoria Sterling, I'd strongly suggest you reconsider." "I'm not going to embarrass her, darling. I'm going to entertain her." Margaret picked up her phone and called her friend Catherine Wells. Catherine was 57, recently divorced, and spent most of her time organizing social circles that revolved around gossip and cruelty disguised as humor. She answered on the first ring. "Catherine, I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "I need a man." "Don't we all, darling?" Margaret laughed. "Not for me, for Victoria." Silence. "You want to set up Victoria Sterling." "I want to seat someone next to her at the gala, someone she would never expect, someone completely outside her world." "Why?" "Because I want to watch her squirm." Catherine thought about it. "I know someone. His name is Daniel Hayes. He runs a little repair shop in Queens. His wife died a few years ago. He's raising a daughter by himself. One of my housekeepers mentioned him. Apparently he fixed her car for practically nothing." "A mechanic." "A mechanic." Margaret's smile widened. "Perfect." "Margaret, this is cruel." "It's a dinner table, Catherine, not a firing squad. I just want to see what happens when the most powerful woman in New York has to sit next to an ordinary man for 3 hours. And what if she eats him alive? Then we'll have something wonderful to talk about for months." Daniel Hayes didn't know about any of this. He was in his shop when the invitation arrived. A thick envelope cream-colored with gold lettering. It looked like it had been delivered to the wrong address. He opened it with grease-stained hands. A charity gala, black tie, the Waldorf Astoria. Daniel read it twice. He looked at the envelope again, checking the address. It was addressed to him, Daniel Hayes, his shop address. He set it on his workbench and went back to the engine he was rebuilding. That night, after he put Emma to bed, he sat at the kitchen table and read the invitation a 3rd time. "Who sends a mechanic from Queens an invitation to a black tie gala?" he muttered. He almost threw it away, but something stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the fact that he hadn't gone anywhere except the shop, the grocery store, and Emma's school in 3 years. He picked up the phone and called his sister Laura. Laura was 45, lived in New Jersey, and had been trying to get Daniel to leave his shop and rejoin the world since Sarah's funeral. "Laura, I got an invitation to some charity thing in Manhattan." "What kind of charity thing?" "Black tie, fancy, at the Waldorf." "Danny, are you serious?" "I'm serious." "You're going?" "I don't have a suit." "I'll buy you a suit." "Laura." "Daniel James Hayes, you have spent 3 years buried in that shop. You go to work, you come home, you take care of Emma, and you go to sleep. That's not a life. That's a schedule. You're going to this gala if I have to drag you there myself." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "I don't belong at something like that, Laura." "Why not?" "Because those people, they're billionaires, CEOs, people who buy buildings for fun. I fix cars. I'm not their kind of person." Laura's voice softened. "Danny, listen to me. Sarah would want you to go. You know she would." He didn't answer. "She'd say, 'Danny, stop hiding. Go see the world, and bring me back a good story.'" Daniel smiled, because that was exactly what Sarah would have said. "Fine," he said. "I'll go." "Good. Now what size jacket do you wear?" 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in front of a mirror in Laura's living room, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. The jacket was slightly too big in the shoulders. The pants were half an inch too short. The tie was borrowed from Laura's husband Phil, who hadn't worn a tie since 2011. Emma sat on the couch watching him. "Daddy, you look weird." "Thanks, sweetheart." "Why are you wearing that?" "I'm going to a fancy dinner." "Why?" "Because Aunt Laura said I have to." Emma tilted her head. "Are you going on a date?" Daniel turned around. "What, no? It's a dinner, a charity thing." "Tommy at school said when dads get dressed up nice, it means they're going on a date." "Tommy at school is 7 years old. He doesn't know what he's talking about." Emma grinned. "Mommy would say you look handsome." Daniel's hands stopped on his tie. He looked at his daughter. 7 years old, brown hair like Sarah's, same smile, same way of saying exactly the right thing at exactly the wrong time. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She probably would." Laura drove him into Manhattan. The whole way she gave him advice he didn't ask for. "Don't talk about engines." "I won't." "Don't eat with your elbows on the table." "I'm not 12, Laura." "Don't stare at anyone famous." "Who would I stare at?" "I don't know. Celebrities go to these things. Just act normal." "I am normal. That's the problem." Laura pulled up in front of the Waldorf Astoria. Daniel looked at the building through the car window. Men and women in designer clothes were stepping out of black cars. Diamonds, watches that cost more than his house, laughter that sounded rehearsed. "Laura, I can't do this." "Yes, you can. These aren't my people." "Danny, you survived 2 tours in Afghanistan. You rebuilt an engine blindfolded during a sandstorm in Kandahar. You delivered your daughter when the ambulance didn't make it in time. You can survive a dinner party." He looked at her. "You're not going to let me leave, are you?" "Not a chance." Daniel stepped out of the car, straightened his borrowed tie, and walked into the most expensive building he had ever entered in his life. Inside the gala was exactly what he expected, and nothing like what he was prepared for. Crystal chandeliers, waiters carrying trays of food he couldn't identify, conversations filled with words like portfolio and acquisition and fiscal quarter. Daniel took a glass of water from a passing waiter. "No champagne, sir?" the waiter asked. "No thanks, I'm driving." The waiter looked confused. Nobody at this event drove themselves anywhere. Daniel found his table, table 14, near the back of the room close to the kitchen doors. He sat down and looked at the place cards. His name was written in elegant calligraphy on a small ivory card, Daniel Hayes. Next to it another card, Victoria Sterling. He didn't recognize the name. He pulled out his phone and texted Laura. "Who is Victoria Sterling?" Laura texted back in 14 seconds. "Are you kidding me? She's one of the richest women in America. Google her right now." Daniel put his phone away. He didn't Google her. It didn't matter to him who she was. He was here because his sister guilted him into it, and he planned to eat dinner, make polite conversation, and be home in time to check on Emma before she fell asleep. 2 minutes later, Victoria Sterling arrived at the table. She didn't walk. She moved with the kind of precision that told Daniel she was aware of every single person watching her. And people were watching. Heads turned, conversations paused. Someone at the next table whispered her name like it was a weather warning. She wore a black dress, simple, expensive. No jewelry except a single watch that probably cost more than Daniel's shop. She sat down without greeting anyone. She didn't look at Daniel. She didn't look at anyone. She opened her phone, read something on the screen, typed a response, and set the phone face down on the table. Then she reached for her water glass. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in a long time." Victoria's hand stopped. She turned slowly and looked at Daniel for the first time. Her eyes were sharp, analytical, the kind of eyes that measured people in seconds and discarded them just as fast. "Excuse me, I said you look tired. Not in a bad way, just tired, like you've been carrying something heavy for a while." Victoria stared at him. Nobody spoke to her like this. Not her employees, not her board members, not the senators and governors who called her for donations. Nobody looked at Victoria Sterling and said what they actually saw. "And who are you?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, cold, the same voice she used in boardrooms when someone said something she considered beneath her. "Daniel Hayes." "Daniel Hayes," she repeated, as if testing whether the name was worth remembering. "And what do you do, Daniel Hayes?" "I fix cars." Victoria blinked. "You fix cars." "That's right. And you're at this gala because my sister told me I needed to get out more." Victoria studied him the way she studied quarterly reports, looking for flaws, looking for angles, looking for the trick. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "I saw your name on the place card, Victoria Sterling. And that means nothing to you, should it?" Across the room, Margaret Ashford was watching. She leaned toward Catherine and whispered, "Look at her face. She doesn't know what to do with him." Catherine shook her head. "This is going to be a disaster. That's what I'm counting on." Back at the table, Victoria picked up her water glass and took a slow sip. "Mr. Hayes, I run Sterling Industries. We manage over $40 billion in assets across 6 countries. I've been on the cover of Forbes 4 times. The Wall Street Journal called me the most influential businesswoman in America last year." She set the glass down. "Does any of that impress you?" Daniel thought about it. "Not really." Victoria's jaw tightened. "And why not?" "Because you said all of that like you were trying to convince me of something. And in my experience, people who need to convince you how important they are usually aren't sure themselves." The table went silent. A man sitting 3 seats away, a venture capitalist named Howard, choked on his champagne. Victoria's fingers tightened around her napkin. She could destroy this man with a sentence. She had destroyed CEOs with less. She had made grown men cry in negotiations. She had ended careers over a handshake that lasted 1 second too long. But something about Daniel's expression stopped her. He wasn't challenging her. He wasn't trying to provoke her. He was just being honest. And Victoria Sterling hadn't encountered honesty in so long that she had forgotten what it looked like. "You're very direct, Mr. Hayes," she said. "I work with engines. Engines don't care about diplomacy. Either something works or it doesn't. People aren't engines. No, but they break the same way, usually because someone ignored a problem until it was too late." Victoria looked at him for a long time. "Are you suggesting I'm broken, Mr. Hayes?" "I'm suggesting you're running on fumes. I've seen it before. People who keep pushing because stopping scares them more than burning out." The waiter arrived with the first course, some kind of small artistic arrangement of food that Daniel couldn't identify. He looked at it. "What is this?" "Seared ahi tuna with a yuzu reduction and microgreens," the waiter said. Daniel nodded slowly. "In Queens, we call that fish on a plate." Victoria almost smiled. Almost. She caught herself. She didn't smile at strangers. She didn't smile at men she had known for 5 minutes. She didn't smile at mechanics from Queens who said things that accidentally made sense. But something shifted, something tiny, something she wouldn't have noticed if she hadn't been paying such close attention. She wanted to keep talking to him, not because he was interesting in the way her business associates were interesting, calculating, strategic, always angling for something, but because Daniel Hayes talked to her the way she imagined normal people talk to each other, like she was just a person, like the money didn't matter. "Tell me about your cars, Mr. Hayes," she said. Daniel looked surprised. "You want to hear about cars? I want to hear about something that isn't a financial projection for the next quarter. Humor me." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "All right, I've got a 1969 Chevelle in the shop right now, brought in by a guy named Arthur. He's 82 years old, bought the car when he was 25, drove it on his first date with his wife, Drove it to the hospital when his son was born. Drove it to his wife's funeral last year." Daniel paused. "The engine's shot. Transmission's barely holding. Rust everywhere. Any reasonable person would scrap it." "But you're not scrapping it," Victoria said. "No." "Why not?" "Because Arthur doesn't need a car. He needs to sit in the driver's seat and remember what his life felt like before everything got quiet." Victoria set down her fork. She didn't say anything for a moment. "That's an expensive sentiment for a man who fixes cars for a living." "It's not sentiment. It's the job. People bring me broken things. Sometimes it's an engine. Sometimes it's something else. I just fix what I can." Victoria looked at her plate, then at Daniel, then at the room full of billionaires and politicians and people who had spent the entire evening talking about money as if it were oxygen. "Nobody at this table has said anything interesting to me in 2 hours," she said quietly. "Then maybe you've been sitting at the wrong tables." Victoria picked up her wine glass. "Maybe I have." Across the room, Margaret noticed something she didn't expect. Victoria was still sitting at the table. She hadn't left. She hadn't complained. She hadn't humiliated anyone. She was talking to the mechanic from Queens, and she was leaning in. Margaret turned to Catherine. "What's happening?" Catherine squinted across the room. "I think she likes him." "That's impossible." "Margaret, look at her. She's actually listening to him. When was the last time you saw Victoria Sterling listen to anyone?" Margaret didn't answer, because the truth was, she had never seen it. Not once. Back at the table, the conversation had shifted. Victoria found herself asking Daniel questions she had never asked anyone at these events. "You mentioned you're raising your daughter alone." "That's right, Emma. She's 7. "How old was she when your wife passed?" 4. Victoria paused. "Does she remember her?" Daniel looked down at his hands. "Some things. She remembers her voice. She remembers the way she smelled like vanilla and something else she can't describe. She keeps a drawing of her mother next to her bed. Drew it herself when she was 5. It doesn't look anything like Sarah, but Emma says it does. So it does." Victoria felt something tighten in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed in years. "That must be difficult, doing it alone." "It is. But Emma doesn't need a perfect father. She needs a present one. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "A perfect father has all the answers. A present father admits when he doesn't know and figures it out together." Victoria thought about her own father, William Sterling, a man who had answers for everything and solutions for nothing. "My father ran a company into the ground," she said. She didn't know why she said it. She never talked about her father, not to colleagues, not to journalists, not to anyone. But Daniel didn't react the way she expected. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't change the subject. He just said, "Did you fix it?" "Yes." "Then he taught you something, even if he didn't mean to." Victoria looked at him. "You have an unusual way of seeing things, Mr. Hayes." "I have a simple way of seeing things. Most people confuse the two." The dinner continued. Courses came and went. The other guests at table 14 made small talk among themselves, but Victoria and Daniel existed in their own conversation, separate from the rest of the room. She told him about the Whitmore acquisition, about the legal injunction filed that morning, about the judge in Delaware. Daniel listened carefully. "Why do they want to block the merger?" he asked. "Because if Sterling Industries acquires Whitmore, we control the largest infrastructure investment portfolio on the East Coast. Their board doesn't want to lose independence." "Makes sense." "It's not about making sense. It's about winning." "Is it always about winning for you?" Victoria stopped. "Yes," she said. "It is." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." She said it without thinking, and the moment the words left her mouth, she wanted to take them back. She had just admitted weakness to a stranger. Victoria Sterling didn't admit weakness. Not to her board, not to her lawyers, not to the mirror in her bathroom at 3 in the morning when the penthouse felt like a prison. But Daniel didn't use it against her. He didn't file it away for later. He didn't smirk. He just nodded. "My wife used to say that winning is just losing in a nicer outfit." Victoria let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. "Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was the wisest person I ever knew, and she married a mechanic from Queens, so maybe wisdom looks different than people think." At that moment, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, a text from Richard Calloway. "Victoria, the Whitmore situation just escalated. They've leaked our internal projections to the press. Bloomberg is running the story in 20 minutes. Our stock is going to take a hit at the open." Victoria's face changed instantly. The warmth, whatever small amount had crept in during the last hour, disappeared. The Iron Queen returned. She stood up from the table. "I have to go." Daniel nodded. "I hope you fix it." She looked at him. "I always fix it." She grabbed her phone and her clutch and started walking toward the exit. Fast, precise, every step measured. But after 7 steps she stopped. She turned around. Daniel was watching her, not with the desperate look of a man hoping to be noticed by a billionaire, not with the calculating look of someone figuring out how to use a connection. He was watching her the way a mechanic watches an engine looking for the thing that everyone else missed. Victoria walked back to the table. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a business card, and set it on the table in front of him. "Mr. Hayes." "Yes." "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., my office, 57th floor, Sterling Tower." Daniel looked at the card, then at her. "Why?" Victoria picked up the financial report that had been sitting on the table display throughout dinner, the one connected to the Whitmore deal. "Because during the last hour, while everyone at this table was talking about themselves, you asked me 3 questions about this deal that none of my executives have thought to ask in 6 months. She straightened her jacket. "I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in competence. And you, Mr. Hayes, just demonstrated more of it in one dinner than my entire senior team has shown all quarter." She turned and walked out of the ballroom. Daniel sat alone at table 14. He looked at the business card. Then he looked at the room full of billionaires. Then he picked up his phone and texted Laura. "You were right. I got a good story." Across the room, Margaret Ashford's mouth was hanging open. "Catherine," she whispered, "what just happened?" Catherine shook her head slowly. "I think your joke just backfired." Daniel got home at 11:15 p.m. Laura's husband Phil had stayed with Emma. She was already asleep, curled up on the couch with a blanket and the drawing of her mother tucked under her arm. Daniel carried her to bed. He pulled the blanket up to her chin. He kissed her forehead. Then he sat on the edge of her bed in the dark and held her small hand. "Sarah," he whispered to the empty room, "something happened tonight. I met someone. Not like that. I met someone who reminded me that the world is bigger than this shop and this apartment and this sadness." He paused. "I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means anything. But for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel invisible." He squeezed Emma's hand gently. "I think you would have liked her. She's terrifying, but she's honest, and she's more alone than anyone I've ever met, including me." He stood up. "I don't know what happens next, but I think I'm going to find out." Daniel walked to the kitchen, sat down at the table, and stared at Victoria Sterling's business card until 2 a.m. At 6:30 in the morning, he put on the only clean shirt he owned, kissed Emma goodbye, and drove his 20-year-old truck into Manhattan. He parked 3 blocks from Sterling Tower because the parking lot charged $40 an hour, and Daniel Hayes was still a mechanic from Queens, no matter whose office he was walking into. He stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the building. 57 floors of glass and steel. His entire world fit inside a 2-car garage. He adjusted his collar. He walked through the front doors. And for the second time in 24 hours, Daniel Hayes entered a world that was never designed for a man like him. The lobby of Sterling Tower smelled like money and silence. Daniel walked through the front doors and immediately felt every pair of eyes in the building land on him. The security guard at the front desk looked him up and down the wrinkled shirt, the boots that still had a trace of motor oil on the left sole, the face of a man who clearly did not belong here. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here to see Victoria Sterling." The guard didn't laugh, but his mouth did something close to it. "Do you have an appointment?" "She told me to be here at 8. "Your name?" "Daniel Hayes." The guard typed the name into his computer. His expression changed. "One moment, Mr. Hayes." He picked up a phone, spoke quietly into it, and then hung up. 57th floor, the elevator on the right. Someone will meet you." Daniel nodded and walked toward the elevator. He pressed the button and waited. A woman in a tailored gray suit stood next to him, holding a leather briefcase and a cup of coffee that probably cost $9. She glanced at him sideways. Daniel stepped into the elevator. He pressed 57. The woman pressed 42. Neither of them spoke. When the doors opened on 42, the woman stepped out. Before the doors closed, she turned and looked at Daniel one more time, as if trying to memorize his face for a story she would tell later. The elevator continued upward, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57. The doors opened. A young woman was waiting for him. Late 20s, dark hair pulled back tight, wearing a navy blazer, and an expression that suggested she had already judged him and found him lacking. "Mr. Hayes." "That's me." "I'm Claire, Ms. Sterling's executive assistant. She's expecting you." Claire turned and walked without waiting for him to follow. Daniel followed anyway. They passed through a floor that was almost entirely glass walls, glass offices, glass conference rooms. Everything transparent, everything visible, like the whole building was designed to make sure nobody could hide. Claire stopped in front of a set of double doors. "Ms. Sterling is on a call. She'll be with you in a moment. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "Coffee would be great. Black." Claire nodded and disappeared. Daniel stood alone in front of the double doors. Through the glass he could see Victoria. She was pacing behind her desk phone pressed to her ear, one hand cutting through the air as she spoke. He couldn't hear her words, but he could read her body language. She was angry, controlled angry, the kind that didn't explode, but compressed into something harder and more dangerous. Claire returned with his coffee. "She'll be just a minute." Daniel took the coffee and waited. 3 minutes later, the double doors opened. Victoria stood in the doorway. She looked different from last night. Last night she had been polished, contained, operating within the social rules of a charity gala. This morning she was something else. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hair was pulled back but not perfectly. There were circles under her eyes that told Daniel she hadn't slept at all. "Mr. Hayes, you came. You told me to. I tell a lot of people to do things. Most of them find excuses not to." She stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. Daniel walked into the office. It was enormous. A desk the size of his kitchen table, a wall of windows overlooking Manhattan, screens showing financial data that scrolled like a heartbeat monitor. Victoria closed the door behind him. "Sit down." Daniel sat in one of the chairs across from her desk. Victoria didn't sit. She stood behind her desk and looked at him the way a general looks at a map before deciding where to send troops. "Last night," she said, "you asked me 3 questions about the Whitmore acquisition. Do you remember what they were?" "I remember." "Tell me." Daniel set his coffee down. "I asked you why Whitmore's board was fighting a deal that would make their shareholders richer. I asked you whether you had checked if anyone on your own team had a reason to want the merger to fail. And I asked you what Whitmore was actually afraid of losing because it wasn't money." Victoria crossed her arms. "My entire executive team has been working on this acquisition for 14 months. I have lawyers billing me $1,200 an hour. I have analysts with degrees from Harvard and Wharton running models, and not one of them, not a single one, asked those 3 questions. Maybe they were too close to it. They were too afraid to ask. There's a difference." She sat down. "Mr. Hayes, what do you know about corporate mergers?" "Nothing." "What do you know about financial markets?" "I know my rent goes up every year and my income doesn't." "What do you know about Sterling Industries?" "I know you run it, I know it's big, and I know that whatever is happening with this Whitmore deal kept you up all night, which means it's either more complicated than it looks or someone on your side is working against you." Victoria leaned forward. "Why do you say that?" "Because I spent 20 years fixing engines, and when an engine is running rough, it's usually not the obvious problem. It's a loose connection somewhere you're not looking. A wire that's corroded, a gasket that's failing slowly. The big parts are easy to check. It's the small parts that kill you." Victoria stared at him for a long time. Then she did something that Claire, standing outside the glass doors and watching through the window, had never seen her do in 4 years. She smiled. Not a business smile, not a press conference smile, a real one. Brief, surprised, almost involuntary. "Mr. Hayes, I'm going to show you something, and I need you to tell me what you see." She turned one of the screens on her desk toward him. It displayed a financial report, dense columns of numbers, projections, revenue forecasts. "This is the disclosure document we submitted to Whitmore's board 6 months ago. Their legal team is claiming we misrepresented projected revenue. They say our numbers are inflated." Daniel looked at the screen. "I'm not a finance guy, Ms. Sterling. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to look at it the way you look at an engine. Don't worry about what the numbers mean. Look at the pattern." Daniel leaned forward. He studied the screen for a full minute without speaking. Victoria waited. "This column here," he said, pointing to a series of figures on the right side of the document. "These numbers jump, every other entry. The rest of the document follows a pretty steady pattern, but this column has spikes that don't match anything around it." Victoria's expression changed. Go on. It's like a timing belt that's off rhythm. Everything else is running smooth, but this one section keeps skipping. Either the data is wrong or someone changed these numbers after the rest of the document was finalized. Victoria pulled the screen back toward her and started scrolling through the column Daniel had identified. She was quiet for almost 2 minutes. Then she picked up her phone. Richard, get up here, now. She hung up and looked at Daniel. Those entries were modified. Someone altered the projected revenue figures in that column after the document was approved. The timestamps don't match. What does that mean? It means someone inside my company changed the numbers to make our projections look inflated, which gave Whitmore's legal team the ammunition to file the injunction. Someone sabotaged you. Yes. From the inside. Yes. Daniel picked up his coffee. Told you. Loose connection. Richard Calloway arrived 6 minutes later. He was sweating. He always sweated when Victoria called him with that tone. He walked into the office and immediately noticed Daniel. Victoria, who is this? This is Daniel Hayes. Is he a consultant? He's a mechanic. Richard's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, irritation, and finally a carefully constructed mask of professionalism. A mechanic. Richard, sit down. We have a problem that's bigger than Whitmore. Richard sat. Victoria showed him the column Daniel had identified. She pointed out the timestamp discrepancies. She walked him through the pattern. Richard's face lost its color. This can't be right, he said. It is right. Someone on our team altered these figures after the disclosure was approved, which means the injunction isn't Whitmore's doing. Someone fed them the ammunition. Victoria, that would mean... It would mean someone inside Sterling Industries is actively trying to sabotage this merger, and since only 7 people had access to this document after approval, the list of suspects is very short. Richard swallowed. Who had access? You, Marcus, Helen, David Chen, Patricia Wolfe, Robert Langford, and me. You're not seriously suggesting... I'm suggesting that one of the 6 people I trust most in this company betrayed me, and I intend to find out who. Richard looked at Daniel again. And he, the mechanic, he found it in less than 60 seconds, which raises a question about what exactly you and your team have been doing for the last 14 months. Richard opened his mouth closed. It opened it again. Victoria, I have been working on this deal around the clock. My team has been... Your team missed it, Richard. A man who has never seen a financial report in his life walked in here and found a problem that your entire department couldn't see. Either your team is incompetent or your team wasn't looking. Richard stood up. I don't appreciate being ambushed, Victoria, and I certainly don't appreciate being humiliated in front of a stranger. Then find out who altered those numbers before I find out myself. Because if I find out before you do, Richard, I'm going to start asking why. Richard left the office without another word. Victoria turned to Daniel. Thank you. For what? What? For looking at something everyone else assumed was already perfect. Nobody's perfect, Ms. Sterling, not even your spreadsheets. Victoria leaned back in her chair. Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. I don't know how to give any other kind. Why aren't you intimidated by me? Everyone who walks into this office is intimidated. My lawyers are intimidated. My board members are intimidated. Men who run billion-dollar companies sit in that chair and choose their words like they're defusing a bomb. But you sit there and talk to me like we're at a coffee shop. Daniel thought about it. Because I've been scared before. Really scared. Not boardroom scared. Not losing money scared. I've been the kind of scared where people are shooting at you, and the only thing between you and the ground is a helicopter that might not start. He paused. After that, sitting in a nice office with a smart woman who's having a bad week doesn't really register on the fear scale. Victoria looked at him differently then. Something shifted behind her eyes, a recalculation, a reassessment. Military. Army. 2 tours. Afghanistan. What did you do? I was an engineer. Combat engineer, technically. I kept things running. Vehicles, generators, communication equipment. If it had an engine and it broke, they called me. And now you fix cars in Queens. And now I fix cars in Queens. That seems like a waste. Of what? Of talent. Daniel shook his head. It's not a waste if it's what you choose. I chose a life where I could be home every night for my daughter. I chose a life where I could look at my hands at the end of the day and see something I built instead of something I destroyed. That's not a waste. That's the whole point. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I've never met anyone like you, Mr. Hayes. I get that a lot, usually right before someone decides I'm not useful anymore. I don't think you're not useful. I think you might be the most useful person I've met in 10 years. She stood up and walked to the window. Manhattan stretched out below her, buildings and traffic and millions of people, all moving in different directions. Someone in my company is trying to destroy me, she said without turning around. The Whitmore sabotage is just the beginning. I can feel it. There's something larger happening. Someone is positioning themselves to take control of Sterling Industries, and they're using this merger as the weapon. Do you know who? I have suspicions. Then why haven't you acted on them? Because in my world, acting on suspicion without proof is how you lose. You need evidence. You need documentation. You need to catch someone in the act. And whoever is doing this is smart. Smart enough to alter a financial document and making it look like my mistake. She turned and faced him. I know this is going to sound insane, but I need someone I can trust. Someone who isn't connected to this company, this industry, these people. Someone who looks at problems differently. You're asking a mechanic to help you fight a corporate conspiracy. I'm asking someone with good eyes and no agenda to help me see what I'm missing. Daniel took a long breath. Ms. Sterling, I have a 7-year-old daughter. I have a shop in Queens that barely breaks even. I fix cars for people who can't afford to go anywhere else. My world is very small and I like it that way. I understand. I'm not sure you do. I'm not saying no because I can't help. I'm saying this because if I step into your world, it's going to touch mine. And my world has Emma in it. That's not something I gamble with. Victoria nodded slowly. You're right. I shouldn't have asked. She walked back to her desk and sat down. The meeting was over. Daniel could feel it, the way the air in the room changed, the way she pulled back into herself like a door closing. He stood up. He walked toward the door. He put his hand on the handle, and then he stopped. What if I just look at the documents? Victoria looked up. Just the documents. Nothing else. I don't come to your meetings. I don't talk to your people. I don't put myself in a position where anyone knows I'm involved. You show me the paperwork, I look at the patterns, and I tell you what I see, like a second pair of eyes. Why would you do that? Because last night you asked me about my cars, and you actually listened. Nobody at that table cared about an old man's Chevelle, but you did. And I think someone who listens like that deserves someone who looks for them. Victoria studied him. You're not doing this for money. I don't need your money, Ms. Sterling. Then what do you need? I need to be home by 5:30 to pick up my daughter from school. That's it. Victoria almost smiled again. This time she let herself. Deal. Daniel opened the door. One more thing, Mr. Hayes. He turned. Call me Victoria. He nodded. Then call me Daniel. He left the office. Claire watched him walk to the elevator. She had heard everything through the intercom she wasn't supposed to be monitoring. She picked up her phone and made a call. He's leaving now, she said quietly. The person on the other end spoke for 10 seconds. No, Claire said. She trusts him. I've never seen her trust anyone this fast. More silence on the other end. I understand, Claire said. I'll keep you informed. She hung up and went back to her desk. That evening, Daniel was back in his shop. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Arthur's 1969 Chevelle sat on the lift, gutted and waiting. Daniel was underneath it when his phone rang. Laura. How was it? How was what? Don't play dumb with me, Daniel. How was the meeting with the billionaire? It was fine. Fine. You walked into Victoria Sterling's office and it was fine. She showed me some paperwork. I pointed out a problem. She said thank you. That's it. That's it. Laura was quiet for a moment. You're lying. I'm not lying. Danny, you are the worst liar in the Hayes family, and that includes Dad, who once tried to convince Mom he didn't eat the entire Thanksgiving pie by hiding the empty dish in the bathtub. Daniel laughed. Laura, it's nothing. She's dealing with some business stuff. She asked if I could look at some documents. That's all. She asked a mechanic to look at business documents. She asked someone with fresh eyes, her words, not mine. Danny, be careful. Of what? Of getting involved in something bigger than you. Laura, I fix cars. I'm not getting involved in anything. I'm just reading some paperwork. Famous last words. Daniel hung up and went back to the Chevelle. But Laura's words stayed with him. The next morning, a courier arrived at Daniel's shop with a sealed envelope. Inside were printed copies of financial documents, the same ones Victoria had showed him on her screen, plus additional files related to the Whitmore acquisition. There was a handwritten note on Sterling Industries letterhead. Daniel, look for the loose connections. I'll be in my office until 9 p.m. if you find anything. V. Daniel spread the documents across his workbench, pushing aside wrenches and socket sets to make room. For the next 4 hours between customers, he read. He didn't understand most of the financial language. Terms like amortization schedules and convertible debentures meant nothing to him. But Victoria was right. She hadn't asked him to understand the finance. She had asked him to look at patterns, and Daniel Hayes was very, very good at patterns. By noon, he had found 3 more anomalies, small ones, the kind of things that wouldn't stand out to someone who was looking at the big picture. But to someone who spent his life diagnosing engine problems by listening for sounds that didn't belong, they were obvious. Certain numbers appeared in sequences that didn't match the rest of the data. Dates that should have been consecutive were slightly off. And in one section, the same figure was repeated across 3 different categories, identical to the decimal point, which Daniel knew was statistically almost impossible unless someone had copied and pasted it. He called Victoria. She answered on the first ring. Daniel, I found 3 more. Tell me. He told her. She was quiet for a long time. Daniel, the entries you just described were all in sections managed by the same person. Who? David Chen, my vice president of strategic planning. Is he someone who would do something like this? David has been with me for 9 years. He was one of the first people I hired when I rebuilt the company. He was at my wedding. He sent flowers when my father died. That's not what I asked. I asked if he would do something like this. Victoria paused. 6 months ago, David was passed over for promotion. He expected to be named Chief Operating Officer. I chose someone else. He didn't say anything at the time, but things have been different since then. Different how? Quieter. David used to argue with me in meetings. He used to push back on my decisions. It was one of the things I valued about him. But after the promotion, he stopped pushing back. He agreed with everything. He smiled more. He became easier to work with. That's what worried you. Yes. Because in your world, when someone stops fighting, it means they've already decided to fight a different way. Victoria was silent. I need proof, Daniel. Not patterns. Proof. Then you need to look at his computer. I can't access his files without cause. If I'm wrong, I destroy a 9-year relationship, and every employee in the company will see me as paranoid. And if you're right, then he's been destroying me from the inside for 6 months, and I've been too close to see it. Daniel wiped his hands on a shop rag. Victoria, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why do you trust me? The question hung in the air. I don't know, she said, and that scares me more than anything David Chen might be doing. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he said the only thing he could think of. I'll keep looking. He hung up and went back to the documents. At 3:15, he drove to Emma's school. She was waiting outside her backpack hanging from one shoulder, her shoes untied. Daddy. She ran to him and he caught her. Hey, baby, how was school? Good. We learned about volcanoes. Did you know that lava is so hot it can melt rocks? I did know that. Mrs. Patterson said Yellowstone is a supervolcano, and if it erupts, we're all going to die. Mrs. Patterson shouldn't say things like that to 7-year-olds. She said it to Tommy first, and then Tommy told everyone. Of course Tommy did. They drove home. Emma talked the entire way about volcanoes, about Tommy, about the class hamster that escaped again and was found inside the piano. Daniel listened to every word. He had made a promise to himself when Sarah died. He would never be too tired, too distracted, or too busy to hear his daughter's stories, no matter how small they seemed. They got home. Daniel made dinner spaghetti, Emma's favorite. She sat at the kitchen table doing homework while he cooked. Daddy. Yeah. Who were you talking to on the phone today? Daniel stirred the sauce. Someone from work. You sounded different. Different how? I don't know, like you were talking to a friend. Daniel turned and looked at her. She's not exactly a friend. She's someone I'm helping with a problem. Is she nice? She's complicated. Emma considered this. Mommy always said complicated people are the most interesting. Daniel's hand stopped stirring. Yeah, he said. She did say that. After dinner, after homework, after a chapter of the book they were reading together, a story about a dog who travels across the country to find its family. Daniel tucked Emma into bed. She held on to his hand. Daddy. Yeah, baby. Are you happy? The question hit him harder than he expected. I'm happy when I'm with you. But what about when you're not with me? He didn't answer right away. I'm working on it, Emma. She squeezed his hand. Good, because Mommy would want you to be happy all the time, not just with me. Daniel kissed her forehead and turned off the light. He went to the kitchen table, sat down, and stared at the documents spread across it. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Did you find anything else? He texted back. 3 more anomalies, all in Chen's sections, but there's something else. His phone rang immediately. What did you find? There's a second set of changes. Different handwriting, if that makes sense. The ones I found earlier, the ones in Chen's sections, they're sloppy. Whoever did them was in a hurry or didn't think anyone would look that closely. But there's another set of changes in a different section. These are cleaner, more careful, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Which section? The executive compensation projections, page 47 through 52. Victoria went quiet. Daniel could hear her breathing. Daniel, those pages were prepared by Richard Calloway, your CFO. My CFO. The man who was sweating in your office this morning. Yes. Victoria, I'm going to say something you might not want to hear. Say it. You've got 2 people working against you, not one. And one of them is much better at it than the other. Chen is the distraction. He's the one you're supposed to find. He's the noise. But whoever changed those numbers on pages 47 through 52, that's the real threat. And they're counting on you being so focused on Chen that you never look at anything else. Victoria didn't speak for 30 seconds. How does a mechanic from Queens think like this? I told you I spent 20 years fixing things that were broken. The hardest problems are never the ones that are obvious. They're the ones hiding behind the obvious problem. Richard Calloway has been with me for 12 years, and David Chen has been with you for 9. Time doesn't equal loyalty, Victoria. It equals access. Another long silence. Daniel, if you're right, if Richard is involved, then this isn't just corporate sabotage. This is a coordinated attack on my company, and I might be the last person in my own building who sees it. Not the last person. You've got me. A mechanic with no financial training and a 7-year-old daughter. And very good eyes. Despite everything, Victoria laughed. It was short, almost harsh, the laugh of someone who had forgotten the feeling and was surprised to find it still worked. I need to think about this, she said. Take your time. I'll be up. You should sleep. So should you. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Victoria. He hung up and sat in the quiet kitchen. The fridge hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere outside, a car alarm went off and then stopped. Daniel looked at the drawing on the refrigerator, Emma's picture of Sarah, stick figure with yellow hair and a big smile. Underneath, in Emma's careful handwriting, my mommy in heaven. Sarah, Daniel said quietly, I think I'm in over my head. The drawing didn't answer. He went to bed. At 6 a.m. the next morning, his phone rang. Not a text. A call. Victoria. He picked up. Daniel, I need you to come to the office. What happened? Richard called an emergency board meeting. He's presenting a proposal to restructure the company's leadership. He wants the board to create a new position, Chief Executive Chairman, and he wants to nominate someone to fill it. Who? He didn't say. But if the board approves the restructure, the new position would have authority over the CEO, over me. He's trying to put someone above you. He's trying to put himself above me, or someone he controls. When is the meeting? Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. That's fast. That's deliberate. He doesn't want me to have time to prepare. Daniel sat up in bed. I'll be there by 8. Daniel, this isn't looking at documents. This is a board meeting. If anyone finds out you're involved, I won't be in the room. I'll be in your office, reading whatever you need me to read. You fight the meeting. I'll find the evidence. Victoria was quiet. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't owe me anything. You have your own life, your own problems. Why are you putting yourself in the middle of mine? Daniel looked down the hallway toward Emma's room. Because my daughter asked me last night if I was happy, and I realized that for the last 3 years I've been safe. I've been steady. I've been responsible. But I haven't been happy. And maybe helping someone else fight for something that matters is part of finding that again. He paused. And because you listen. You actually listen when I talk. And there aren't a lot of people left who do that. Victoria didn't respond for a moment. 8 o'clock, she said. Don't be late. She hung up. Daniel got out of bed. He called Laura. I need you to take Emma to school tomorrow and pick her up. Why, what's going on? I'm helping someone with something. The billionaire. Laura. Danny, I swear to God, if you get mixed up in some rich people mess and forget that you have a child. I would never forget Emma, you know that. Laura sighed. I know. I'm sorry. I just worry about you. I know you do. What time do you need me? 7:30. I'll be there. And Danny, yeah, be careful with this woman. Not because she's dangerous, because she's lonely, and lonely people pull other people into their gravity without meaning to. Daniel hung up. He showered, dressed, and made Emma's lunch turkey sandwich, apple slices, 2 cookies, and a note that said, "You are my favorite person in the whole world. Love, Daddy." He dropped Emma off at Laura's house. Emma hugged him extra tight. You smell like that nice soap, she said. It's the same soap I always use. No, it's the fancy one. You only use the fancy one when something important is happening. Daniel looked at his 7-year-old daughter, who apparently noticed everything. Something is happening, he said, but it's going to be okay. Promise. Promise. He drove into Manhattan, parked 3 blocks away again, walked to Sterling Tower. This time the security guard recognized him. Good morning, Mr. Hayes, 57th floor. Thanks. He rode the elevator up. Claire was waiting. She's in the conference room. She said to set you up in her office. Claire let him in. Victoria's desk was covered in documents, board meeting agendas, financial statements, legal briefs, corporate bylaws. A note was taped to the computer screen. Daniel, everything you need is in the blue folder. Find me something I can use. I'm counting on you. V. Daniel sat down at Victoria Sterling's desk, opened the blue folder, and started reading. For the next 6 hours he read. He read things he didn't understand and things he understood perfectly. He read organizational charts and compensation structures and meeting minutes and email transcripts. And somewhere around hour 4 he found it. Not in the financial documents, not in the merger paperwork, in the meeting minutes from a board session 7 months ago. A vote on executive compensation restructuring. The vote had passed 7-4. One of the dissenting votes was David Chen. That was expected. Chen had been vocal about executive pay structures. But one of the supporting votes caught Daniel's attention. Richard Calloway had voted yes on the restructuring. Nothing unusual about that, except that in the meeting minutes from the previous quarter, Richard had argued passionately against the same restructuring. He had called it premature and fiscally irresponsible. So what changed between one quarter and the next? Daniel dug deeper. He cross-referenced the dates. Between those 2 meetings, 3 things happened. First, David Chen was passed over for promotion. Second, Richard Calloway's wife filed for divorce, a detail buried in a footnote of a disclosure form that most people would have skimmed past. Third, a new member was added to the Sterling Industries Board of Directors, a woman named Patricia Wolfe. Daniel pulled Patricia Wolfe's board appointment documents. She had been nominated by Richard Calloway. Her background was in corporate restructuring. She specialized in leadership transitions. Daniel sat back in Victoria's chair. Leadership transitions. That was the phrase. That was the key. Richard hadn't hired Patricia Wolfe to help the company. He had brought her onto the board to help him take it over. Chen was the decoy, the sloppy sabotage, the obvious suspect, the fire that everyone would focus on while Richard quietly built the structure he needed to remove Victoria from power. And the emergency board meeting tomorrow wasn't just about creating a new leadership position. It was the final move. Daniel picked up the phone on Victoria's desk and called her cell. She answered immediately. Tell me you found something. I found everything, he told her. All of it. The vote reversal, the divorce, Patricia Wolfe's appointment, the pattern, the timeline. Victoria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was silent for so long that Daniel thought the call had dropped. Victoria, I'm here. Her voice was different, quieter. Not the Iron Queen, not the CEO. Something underneath all of that. 12 years, she said. I trusted him for 12 years. I defended him to the board when they wanted to replace him. I gave him a second chance when he made a mistake on the Morrison deal that cost us $20 million. I sat next to him at his mother's funeral. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. This is my fault. I was so focused on winning that I forgot to watch my own back. That's not your fault. That's what trust looks like when it's real. You don't watch your back with people you trust. That's the whole point. Victoria took a shaky breath. Daniel, this board meeting is in 14 hours. I need a plan. I'm not a corporate strategist. No, you're better. You see things clearly. So tell me, what would you do? Daniel thought about it. He thought about engines and loose connections and the way a problem always looks different from the outside than it does from the inside. Don't fight the meeting, he said. What? Don't fight it. Let Richard present his proposal. Let him lay out his entire plan in front of the board. Let him commit to it publicly. And then you show them what he's been doing. All of it. The altered documents, the sabotage, the timeline, Patricia Wolf, everything. You want me to let him walk into his own trap. I want you to let him build the trap himself. Right now, he thinks you don't know. He thinks you're focused on Whitmore. He thinks he's got another 24 hours before anyone connects the dots. If you confront him now, he'll deny everything and destroy the evidence. But if you let him stand up in front of the board tomorrow and present his plan to restructure the company, he'll be on record. He'll have committed to it publicly. And when you show the board what he's really been doing, there's no way out. Victoria was quiet. That's a dangerous play. Only if you're wrong, and you're not wrong. How do you know I'm not wrong? Because I found the loose connections, and they all lead to the same place. Victoria took another breath. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Be in my office before anyone else arrives. I'll be there. Daniel. Yeah. When this is over, however it ends, I owe you more than I can possibly repay. You don't owe me anything. Just win. He hung up and gathered the documents. He organized them in the order Victoria would need them: the timeline first, then the vote records, then Patricia Wolf's appointment, then the altered financial entries. He paperclipped each section and wrote notes in the margins. Clear, simple notes, the kind a mechanic would write. He left Sterling Tower at 6:45 p.m. He drove to Laura's house and picked up Emma. She was asleep on the couch. He carried her to the truck, buckled her in, and drove home. He carried her inside, tucked her into bed, and sat beside her. Sarah, he whispered, tomorrow is going to be a big day. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm helping or making things worse. But there's a woman in a tower in Manhattan who is about to lose everything she built because the people she trusted decided she was easier to betray than to fight. He looked at Emma's drawing on the nightstand, and I know what that feels like. Losing everything. Having the people you count on disappear. I know what it's like to stand in an empty house and wonder how you're supposed to keep going. He touched Emma's hair. So I'm going to help her. Not because she's rich, not because she's powerful, because she's alone, and nobody deserves to fight alone. He stood up and walked to the door. He looked back at his daughter one more time. Then he went to the kitchen, set his alarm for 5 a.m. and laid down on the couch with his boots still on, staring at the ceiling until sleep finally took him. Daniel's alarm went off at 5, but he was already awake. He had slept maybe 2 hours. Not because he was nervous. He had been nervous before, real nervous, the kind where your hands shake and your mouth goes dry and you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. This wasn't that. This was something else. This was the feeling he used to get before a mission. The quiet hum inside his chest that told him today was going to matter. He got up from the couch, splashed water on his face, and made coffee. Strong, black. The kind Sarah used to call motor oil in a mug. He checked on Emma, still sleeping. Her arm was hanging off the side of the bed, and the drawing of Sarah had fallen to the floor during the night. Daniel picked it up and set it back on the nightstand, propping it against the lamp, so Emma would see it first thing when she opened her eyes. He called Laura. It's 5:15 in the morning, Danny. I need you to take Emma again today. I figured. What time? 7. I'll be there at 6:45. And Danny? Yeah. Whatever you're doing today, come home in one piece. I always do. No, you don't. You came home from Afghanistan with a piece missing. You just won't admit it. Daniel didn't answer that. He hung up, showered, and put on the same shirt from yesterday, because it was the only one that didn't have grease stains. Laura arrived at 6:45. Emma was eating cereal at the kitchen table, her feet swinging because they didn't reach the floor. Daddy's going to Manhattan again, Emma announced. Laura looked at Daniel. Again. It's the last time, Daniel said. You said that yesterday. I mean it this time. Emma put down her spoon. Daddy is the complicated lady, okay? Daniel crouched down next to her chair. She's having a tough day. I'm going to help her. Like when you helped Mr. Arthur with his car. Something like that. Emma thought about this. Mommy always said you were the best helper she ever knew. Daniel's throat tightened. Finish your cereal, baby. Aunt Laura's going to take you to school. He kissed the top of her head, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door before Laura could ask any more questions. He drove into Manhattan in the dark. The city was just waking up, delivery trucks, early commuters, the low hum of a place that never fully sleeps but pretends to. He parked in his usual spot 3 blocks from Sterling Tower and walked the rest of the way. The security guard buzzed him through without a word. The elevator was empty, 57 floors of silence. When the doors opened, Claire was already at her desk. She looked up at Daniel with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not hostile, not friendly, something in between, something careful. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. She's waiting for you." "Thanks, Claire." He walked toward Victoria's office. The double doors were open. Victoria was standing behind her desk, but she wasn't looking at documents or staring at screens. She was standing with her hands flat on the desk, leaning forward, staring at nothing. The posture of someone gathering strength. She looked up when Daniel walked in. "You're early." "I'm always early. Habit from the army." "Did you sleep?" "Did you know?" "No." "Then we're even." Victoria straightened up. She was wearing a dark blue suit. No jewelry again except the watch. Her hair was pulled back tight. War paint, Daniel thought. This was her version of suiting up for battle. "The board meeting is at 10, she said. "Richard will present his restructuring proposal first. He'll frame it as a governance improvement checks and balances oversight, the usual language people use when they want to take power without looking like they're taking power. How many board members? 11. I need 6 to vote against the proposal. Right now, I'm confident about 4. 2 are uncertain, and 5 are either loyal to Richard or afraid of going against him. Patricia Wolfe. She'll vote for it. She was put on the board specifically to vote for it." Daniel set the organized documents on Victoria's desk, the same ones he had prepared the night before, with his handwritten notes in the margins. "Walk me through your plan," he said. Victoria picked up the first section. The timeline. "I let Richard present. I don't interrupt. I don't challenge him. I let him commit to every word in front of the entire board." "Good. Then when he finishes, I ask to respond. Standard procedure. The board has to give me the floor." "And that's when you show them?" "That's when I show them everything. The altered financial documents, the time-stamped discrepancies, the connection between Chen's sabotage and Richard's restructuring plan, Patricia Wolfe's appointment timeline, all of it. What about proof that Richard personally altered those numbers? You said the ones on pages 47 through 52 were in his section, but can you prove he was the one who changed them?" Victoria opened a drawer and pulled out a flash drive. "Last night after you left, I called someone, an old friend from my early days at the company, Marcus Webb, head of IT security. I've known Marcus since before Sterling Industries was worth anything. He's the one person in this building I trust completely." "What did he find?" "Every change made to the disclosure document is logged by the system. User ID, timestamp, IP address. Richard used his own credentials to make the alterations. He didn't even bother creating a fake account. He didn't think anyone would look. He didn't think I would look, because he assumed I was too focused on Whitmore to pay attention to internal documents." Daniel nodded. "And Chen's alterations were made from his office computer during business hours, also logged. Marcus has copies of everything." "So Richard and Chen were working together?" "Not exactly. I think Richard used Chen. Chen was angry about being passed over for promotion. He was easy to manipulate. Richard probably encouraged his resentment, maybe even helped him see opportunities to sabotage the merger. But Chen didn't know about the bigger plan. He thought he was just getting revenge on me for the promotion. He didn't realize he was being set up as the fall guy. So when you found the sabotage, you were supposed to blame Chen, fire him, feel like you solved the problem. And while you were busy cleaning up that mess, Richard would push through the restructuring and take control." "Exactly. That's cold. That's corporate America, Daniel." He looked at her. "No, that's betrayal. Don't dress it up." Victoria's expression flickered. Something raw passed across her face and disappeared. "You're right," she said quietly. "It is betrayal." They went over the documents one more time. Daniel pointed out the order he had organized them in chronological building from the smallest detail to the largest conclusion, like following a trail, like diagnosing an engine problem from the first misfire to the root cause. "Start with the financial anomalies," he said. "Don't mention Richard's name. Let the board see the pattern first. Let them ask the questions." "Why?" "Because if you accuse Richard directly, it becomes personal. The board will see it as a power struggle between 2 executives. But if you show them the evidence and let them reach the conclusion themselves, it becomes their discovery. They'll feel like they uncovered it, and people fight harder for conclusions they think are their own. Victoria stared at him. Where did you learn that? My commanding officer in Afghanistan, Sergeant Major William Price. He used to say, don't tell a man what to see. Show him the field and let him find the enemy himself. He'll fight twice as hard. Victoria picked up the documents and organized them in the order Daniel suggested. One more thing, Daniel said. What? Don't be angry. Excuse me. When you present this, don't be angry, be calm, be clear, be factual. If you go in there with anger, Richard will use it against you. He'll say you're emotional. He'll say you're retaliating because you feel threatened by the restructuring. He'll make it about your reaction instead of his actions. Daniel, this man tried to steal my company. I know. And you're going to take it back. But you're going to do it the way you do everything, with precision. Not heat, precision. Victoria took a long breath. You sound like you've done this before. I've diffused a few things in my time. Bombs, situations. At 9:15, people began arriving on the 57th floor, board members in expensive suits carrying leather folders, and the quiet confidence of people who made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Daniel watched them through the glass walls of Victoria's office. He recognized Richard Calloway immediately. Richard walked in at 9:30, talking on his phone, smiling, the smile of a man who believed he had already won. Behind him, a woman Daniel hadn't seen before, tall, mid-50s, silver hair, sharp posture. Patricia Wolfe. Richard glanced toward Victoria's office. He saw Daniel sitting in one of the chairs. His smile faltered for half a second, then returned. He leaned toward Patricia and said something. Patricia looked at Daniel. Then they both walked into the boardroom. Victoria stood up. It's time. Victoria, she turned. You've got this. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, picked up her folder, and walked out of the office. Daniel stayed behind. Victoria had been clear he couldn't be in the boardroom. He wasn't a board member, wasn't an executive, wasn't even an employee. If anyone questioned his presence, it would give Richard ammunition. So Daniel sat in Victoria's office and waited. He could see the boardroom through the glass walls. The doors were closed, but he could see the people inside. 11 board members. Victoria at one end of the table, Richard at the other. Patricia Wolfe seated to Richard's right. Daniel couldn't hear anything. He could only watch. Richard stood up first. He spoke for what felt like 20 minutes. He had slides. He gestured confidently. He pointed to documents. Several board members nodded along. 2 of them were taking notes. Then Richard sat down. Victoria stood up. From where Daniel sat, he could see her face. She was calm, completely calm. The kind of calm that came not from the absence of emotion, but from the total control of it. She spoke. She opened her folder. She passed documents around the table. Daniel watched the board members' faces change as they read. First confusion, then concentration, then realization. One board member, a heavy man in his 60s, looked up from the documents and stared at Richard. Richard was smiling, but the smile was different now. Thinner, tighter. Victoria kept talking. She pointed to specific pages. She turned to a screen and displayed something, probably the system logs Marcus had pulled. The timestamps, the user IDs. Richard's smile disappeared. He said something. Victoria responded. Richard stood up. His voice was raised. Daniel could tell even through the glass. Richard pointed at Victoria. His face was red. Victoria didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture. She stood still and spoke with the precision of a surgeon making an incision. Patricia Wolfe was very still, too still, the stillness of someone calculating escape routes. A board member, a woman on the far side of the table, asked Richard a question. Richard turned to her. He spoke quickly. The woman shook her head. Another board member asked a question. Then another. Richard looked around the table. The faces that had been nodding along to his proposal 5 minutes ago were now looking at him the way people look at someone they've just caught in a lie. Daniel watched Richard's body language change. The confident posture collapsed. The shoulders dropped. The hands that had been gesturing smoothly now gripped the edge of the table. Victoria spoke again. She held up a piece of paper. Even from the other room, Daniel could see it was one of the documents he had organized, the timeline, showing the correlation between Chen's sabotage and Richard's restructuring push. Richard said something sharp. He pointed at the paper. He shook his head. Victoria set the paper down. Then she said something that made the entire room go silent. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he could see the effect. Every person at that table turned and looked at Richard Calloway with an expression that was somewhere between anger and disgust. Richard stood very still for a long time. Then he took off his glasses, set them on the table, and walked out of the boardroom. Patricia Wolfe followed him 30 seconds later. The remaining board members erupted. People were talking over each other, gesturing at the documents. Several were on their phones. One man stood up and began pacing. Victoria stood at the head of the table, motionless. Then she looked through the glass wall directly at Daniel, and she nodded. Daniel exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. The board meeting lasted another 40 minutes. Daniel watched from the office but couldn't follow the details. When the doors finally opened, board members filed out in small groups talking in hushed voices. Several of them glanced toward Victoria's office, toward Daniel. Victoria was the last to leave the boardroom. She walked toward her office, opened the doors, stepped inside and closed them behind her. She stood in front of Daniel. She didn't say anything for a long time. "It's done," she finally said. "What happened?" Richard's restructuring proposal was rejected unanimously. The board voted to launch an internal investigation into the altered documents. Richard and Patricia Wolfe have both been suspended pending the investigation. David Chen will be terminated by end of day. And you? The board reaffirmed my position as CEO unanimously. Daniel leaned back in his chair. "How do you feel?" Victoria sat down in the chair next to him, not behind her desk, next to him, like a person sitting next to another person. "I feel like I just performed surgery on myself without anesthesia." "That sounds about right." Daniel, when I showed them the timeline, the one you organized the board, asked me how I found the discrepancies. They wanted to know which consulting firm, which forensic accounting team, which law firm had done the analysis. "What did you tell them?" "I told them a mechanic from Queens." Daniel laughed. "You did not." "I absolutely did. Howard, the venture capitalist who sits on my board, his exact words were, 'You're telling me a man who fixes cars found what a team of forensic accountants missed?' And I said yes, because he looks at things the way they actually are, not the way people want him to see them." "What did Howard say?" "He asked for your phone number." "Tell Howard I charge $65 an hour and I don't do spreadsheets." Victoria smiled. A real one. The kind that reached her eyes. Then the smile faded. "Richard came to my office on his way out," she said. "Security escorted him, but he asked for 1 minute. I gave it to him." "What did he say?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "He said, 'You'll regret this, Victoria. You can win every boardroom in this city, but you'll still go home to an empty apartment tonight. I may lose my job, but at least I had someone to call when it was over. Who do you have?'" Daniel felt something sharp twist in his chest. Not anger, he had burned through anger a long time ago. Something closer to recognition. The cruel accuracy of a wound that lands exactly where it was aimed. "What did you say back?" "Nothing. I let security take him out." Victoria. "He's right, Daniel. That's the worst part. He tried to destroy my company, and the cruelest thing he could say to me wasn't a threat. It was the truth." She looked at her hands. "I have a $4.7 billion company. I have a penthouse that takes up an entire floor. I have a closet full of clothes that cost more than most people's cars. And when Richard Calloway asked me who I have, I couldn't answer, because the answer is nobody." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That's not true. Don't patronize me." "I'm not patronizing you. I'm telling you the truth. You have someone. You have the guy who drove a 20-year-old truck into Manhattan at 6 in the morning because you asked him to. You have the guy who spent 4 hours reading financial documents he didn't understand because he saw something in your face at a dinner that told him you needed help. You have me." Victoria looked at him. "I'm a mechanic, Victoria. I'm not going to pretend to be anything else. I can't help you run your company. I can't sit on your board. I can't go to your galas and make small talk with people who measure human beings by their net worth. But I can tell you the truth when nobody else will. And I can show up when you need someone to show up. That's what I do. That's who I am." Victoria's eyes were wet. She blinked hard and turned away. "Don't," Daniel said. "Don't what?" "Don't turn away because you're feeling something. That's what you do. You feel something real and you turn it into strategy. You turn it into control. You hide it behind the glass walls and the spreadsheets and the power. But you don't have to do that with me." "Daniel, I don't know how to be anything else." "Yes, you do. You just haven't practiced in a while." She turned back to him. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Victoria Sterling didn't cry, not in her office, not in front of anyone, but she was close. "I haven't had someone talk to me like this in years," she said. "Like what? Like I'm a person, not a CEO, not a billionaire, not the Iron Queen, just a person." "That's because you surround yourself with people who want something from you. I don't want anything from you." "Everyone wants something. I want to pick up my daughter from school by 5:30. That's what I want." Victoria let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside her for months. "What time is it?" Daniel looked at his watch. 12:15. "Have you eaten?" "No." "Neither have I. Let me take you to lunch." "I don't eat at places where the menu doesn't have prices." "Then you pick the place." Daniel looked at her. This woman who controlled billions of dollars, who had just dismantled a conspiracy inside her own company, who had faced down a betrayal that would have broken most people, and she was asking him to pick a place for lunch. "There's a diner on 9th Avenue, he said. "Joe's, best cheeseburger in Manhattan." "I haven't eaten a cheeseburger in 6 years. "Then you're overdue." They left Sterling Tower together. Claire watched them walk to the elevator. She picked up her phone, hesitated, and then put it down. She didn't make a call this time. They walked to Joe's diner. It was 12 blocks. Victoria Sterling walked 12 blocks through Manhattan in a designer suit and heels that cost $2,000, and Daniel Hayes walked beside her in a wrinkled shirt and boots with motor oil on them. Nobody recognized Victoria. Without the boardroom, without the tower, without the armor of her corporate identity, she was just a woman walking down the street. And the anonymity of it, the sheer relief of being invisible, showed on her face. They sat in a booth at Joe's. A waitress named Linda brought them menus. "What can I get you folks?" "2 cheeseburgers," Daniel said. "Fries, 2 coffees." "You got it, hun." Victoria looked at the booth, at the cracked vinyl seats at the counter, where a man in a flannel shirt was reading a newspaper and drinking coffee from a mug that said, "World's Okayest Grandpa." "I can't remember the last time I sat in a place like this," she said. "Places like this are where real life happens. My life doesn't feel very real most days." "That's because you built it to be impressive instead of livable." Victoria flinched. "That's harsh." "That's honest. There's a difference." The food arrived. Victoria picked up the cheeseburger and looked at it like it was a foreign object. "Just eat it," Daniel said. She took a bite. Her expression changed. Not dramatically, Victoria Sterling was not a woman who made dramatic expressions in public. But something softened around her mouth, something eased. "This is good," she said. "Told you." They ate in silence for a while. The kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that happens between two people who don't need to fill every moment with words. "Daniel, can I ask you something personal?" "Depends on how personal." "What was your wife like?" Daniel set down his coffee. "Sarah was the opposite of me. I'm quiet, she was loud, I'm careful, she was reckless. I think about things for 3 days before I make a decision. She made decisions in 3 seconds and figured out the rest later." "How did you meet?" "I was stationed at Fort Bragg. She was a nurse at the base hospital. I came in with a dislocated shoulder, caught it on the frame of a Humvee I was working under. She popped it back in, told me I was an idiot for not wearing proper safety gear, and then asked me if I wanted to get dinner." "She asked you?" "If she hadn't, we'd still be making eye contact across the cafeteria. I'm not exactly smooth." Victoria smiled. "What happened?" "We got married 8 months later. Emma came 2 years after that. We had 6 years together. It wasn't enough time. It'll never be enough time. But it was the best 6 years of my life." "How did she die?" Daniel's hands went still on the table. "Cancer. Pancreatic. By the time they found it, it was everywhere. She had 4 months from diagnosis to the end." He paused. "The last thing she said to me was, 'Don't let Emma forget my laugh. Not my face, not my name, my laugh.' Because Sarah believed that laughter was the most honest thing a person could give someone." Victoria was very quiet. "I don't remember the last time I laughed before I met you," she said. "At the gala, when I called the tuna fish on a plate. That wasn't a laugh, that was a suppressed reaction. It was the beginning of a laugh, you just didn't let it finish. I don't let a lot of things finish." "I've noticed." Victoria pushed a fry around her plate. "Daniel, what are we doing?" "Eating cheeseburgers." "That's not what I mean." "I know what you mean." "Then answer me." Daniel looked at her, directly, the way he looked at things that mattered. "I don't know what we're doing. I know that 3 days ago I was a mechanic who hadn't left Queens in 3 years. I know that right now I'm sitting in a diner with a woman who could buy this entire block and not notice the expense. I know that none of this makes sense. But I also know that when I talk to you, I feel like I'm awake, like something that's been asleep for a long time just opened its eyes. And I haven't felt that since Sarah. Victoria's hand moved across the table. Not far, just an inch, just enough. I'm afraid of this, she said. Afraid of what? Of needing someone. I've spent my entire adult life making sure I never needed anyone, and now I'm sitting in a diner that smells like grease and burned coffee, and I'm terrified, because I think I might need you, and that means you could hurt me. Victoria, everyone who's ever mattered to me has hurt me. Sarah hurt me by dying. My father hurt me by being absent. The army hurt me by sending me to places that changed who I was. Hurt is the price of connection. You can't avoid it. You can only decide whether the connection is worth the cost. Is it? I'm sitting here, aren't I? Victoria looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her cheeseburger and took another bite. This really is a good burger, she said. Best in Manhattan. I'll take your word for it. They finished lunch. Daniel paid. Victoria tried to argue. Daniel shut it down. You can buy the next one. There's going to be a next one, if you want there to be. They walked out of the diner. The city was loud around them. Horns, voices, the constant rush of movement. Victoria stopped on the sidewalk. I have to go back. The board investigation is going to require my attention for the next several days. There will be lawyers' depositions, press inquiries. I know. I might not be able to call. I'm not going anywhere. Victoria hesitated. Daniel, would Emma like to come to dinner this weekend at my apartment? Daniel was surprised. He didn't hide it. You want to meet Emma? I want to cook dinner for someone. I haven't done that in years. And I hear 7-year-olds are excellent at telling you whether your cooking is terrible. She's brutally honest. Then she'll fit right in with the theme of our relationship. Daniel smiled. Saturday, 6 o'clock. Saturday, 6 o'clock. Victoria turned and walked back toward Sterling Tower. After 10 steps, she stopped and turned around. Daniel, yeah, thank you. For today, for the documents, for the diner, for telling me the truth when it would have been easier to say something polite. You're welcome. She turned again and kept walking. Daniel watched her go. Then he walked 3 blocks to his truck, got in, and drove to Queens to pick up his daughter. Emma was waiting at Laura's house, sitting on the front porch with a juice box and a book about volcanoes. Daddy, you're early. I'm always early. No, you're not. You're usually exactly on time. Being early means something good happened. Daniel crouched down and hugged her. Something good happened. What? I'll tell you on the way home. In the truck, Emma peppered him with questions. Was the complicated lady okay? She's going to be okay. Did you help her? I think so. Did she say thank you? She did. Good. Mommy always said you should say thank you when someone helps you. Mommy was right about a lot of things. Daddy, yeah. Is the complicated lady going to be your friend? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I think she already is. Good. You need a friend. Aunt Laura says you need a friend. She says it all the time when she thinks I'm not listening. Aunt Laura should learn to whisper better. That night, after Emma was in bed, Daniel sat on the porch of their small house in Queens. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere. The neighbor's porch light flickered. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. The board just formally suspended Richard and Patricia. Investigation begins Monday. Legal counsel says the evidence is overwhelming. Daniel texted back, good. Another text from Victoria. I just opened my refrigerator and realized I have nothing in it except sparkling water and a container of hummus that expired in March. Daniel laughed and texted, sounds like you need a cheeseburger. Victoria, I think I need more than a cheeseburger. Daniel stared at his phone for a long time. Then he typed, Saturday, I'll bring Emma. She'll tell you everything you need to know about volcanoes. Victoria, I look forward to it. Daniel put his phone down and looked up at the sky. You couldn't see many stars in Queens, too much light pollution, too many buildings. But there were a few, faint, stubborn, refusing to disappear no matter how much the city tried to drown them out. Sarah, he whispered, I know this is crazy. I know you're up there shaking your head, but I promise you Emma comes first. She always comes first. And this woman, she's not replacing you. Nobody replaces you. But she's someone who needs help. And you always told me that helping people was the best thing I knew how to do. He paused. So I'm going to keep helping. and I'm going to trust that wherever this goes, it goes somewhere good. He went inside, locked the door, and checked on Emma one more time. She was sleeping with her arms wrapped around a stuffed elephant, and Sarah's drawing tucked under her chin. Daniel kissed her forehead. "Good night, baby." He went to bed. For the first time in 3 years, he fell asleep before midnight. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Victoria was consumed by the investigation. Her lawyers were building cases against Richard and Chen. The press had gotten wind of the internal shakeup at Sterling Industries, and reporters were calling every hour. Victoria handled it the way she handled everything, with control, with precision, with the Iron Queen mask firmly in place. But every night she texted Daniel, not about the company, not about the investigation, about small things. Tuesday night. "Claire brought me soup today. I think she feels guilty about something, but I can't figure out what." Daniel. "Maybe she's just being nice." Victoria. "People in this building are never just nice. There's always an angle." Daniel. "Not everyone has an angle, Victoria." Victoria. "In my experience, they do." Daniel. "Then you need new experiences." Wednesday night, the board brought in outside counsel, 3 lawyers from a firm I've never used before. They asked me 200 questions today. Nil about Richard, Victoria, about everything, my leadership, my decisions, my judgment. They're not just investigating Richard, they're investigating whether I should have caught this sooner. Daniel, "Should you have, Victoria? Probably, but I was too busy being the Iron Queen to notice that my own castle was crumbling." Daniel, "That's the most self-aware thing you've ever said." Victoria, "Don't get used to it." Thursday night. I fired Claire today. Daniel called her immediately. "What happened?" Marcus found something in the phone records. Claire made 6 calls to Richard's personal cell in the 2 weeks before the board meeting. She was feeding him information. She knew I was looking into the altered documents, and she told him. "That's why Richard pushed for the emergency meeting. He knew you were close to figuring it out." Yes, Claire was his inside source. She'd been reporting to him for over a year. "I'm sorry, Victoria." "Don't be. I should have seen it. She was too perfect, too efficient, too willing to stay late, too eager to be helpful. I mistook loyalty for performance. They're not the same thing." "No, they're not." "Daniel, how do you know when someone is genuinely loyal?" "You don't. That's the terrifying part. You just choose to trust and hope you're right." "That's a terrible system. It's the only one we've got." Friday night, Victoria called him instead of texting. "Are we still on for tomorrow?" 6 o'clock. Emma's been talking about it all week." "What did you tell her about me?" "I told her you were my friend." "Is that what we are?" I told a 7-year-old the version she needed to hear. "And the adult version?" "The adult version is that I don't know what we are, but I know I want to find out." Victoria was quiet. "Daniel, I need to tell you something before tomorrow. Something I should have told you earlier." "Okay." "When I was married to James, when things were falling apart, he asked me to go to counseling, couples therapy. He wanted us to talk to someone together, to try to fix what was broken." "What did you say?" "I said no. I told him that I didn't need a stranger telling me how to feel. I told him that therapy was for people who couldn't solve their own problems. And now I realized that I was terrified, not of therapy, of being seen, of sitting in a room with someone and admitting that I didn't have all the answers, that I was failing at something. I had never failed at anything in my professional life, and the idea that I was failing at my marriage, at the most basic human relationship, was something I couldn't face. So you let it end instead." "I let him walk away, and I told myself it was his choice, but it was mine. I chose the company over him, over us, over everything." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because tomorrow you're bringing your daughter to my home, and I need you to know that I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be around a child. I don't know how to have dinner with people and talk about normal things. I don't know how to be someone's friend. I barely know how to be a human being outside of a boardroom." Victoria. "What?" "Emma is 7. She doesn't care about your net worth or your corporate history or your failed marriage. She's going to care about 2 things, whether you're nice and whether you have dessert." Victoria laughed, short, surprised. "I don't have dessert." "Then stop at a bakery on the way home. Get chocolate cake. You can't go wrong with chocolate cake." "Daniel, I haven't baked or bought a cake in over a decade." "Then it's time to start. Bring napkins. Emma's a messy eater." Victoria laughed again, longer this time. 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. And Victoria, "Yes." Stop worrying. You just took down a corporate conspiracy and saved a $40 billion company. You can handle dinner with a 7-year-old. I'm not so sure about that. I am. Han hung up. He looked at Emma's door. She was already asleep, her backpack packed for tomorrow, her favorite dress laid out on the chair, the blue one with the white flowers that Sarah had bought her the year before she got sick. Daniel walked to the kitchen and sat down. He looked at the empty chair across from him, Sarah's chair, the one nobody sat in anymore. Tomorrow's a big day, Sarah, he said. I'm taking our daughter to meet someone, and I think this might be the start of something. I don't know what, but something. He reached across the table and touched the back of the empty chair. I miss you every single day, every single hour, but I think you'd want this for me. I think you'd want me to stop sitting in this kitchen talking to an empty chair and start sitting across from someone who talks back. He stood up, pushed the chair in and turned off the light. Tomorrow would come whether he was ready or not. Saturday came faster than Daniel expected. He spent the morning at the shop finishing up a brake job on a minivan for a woman named Rosa, who had 3 kids and a husband deployed overseas. He charged her half price. He always charged half price for military families. Sarah would have charged them nothing, but Daniel still had rent to pay. At 2 o'clock he closed the shop, drove home and showered. He stood in front of his closet, a small space that held exactly 11 shirts, 4 pairs of jeans, and 1 suit jacket that Laura had forced on him for the gala, and tried to figure out what a person wears to a billionaire's penthouse for dinner. He picked a clean button-down, dark blue, the one Sarah had bought him for their 5th anniversary. He hadn't worn it since the funeral. He put it on and looked in the mirror. Too much, he asked the empty room. Nobody answered. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing her blue dress with the white flowers. Her hair was brushed, which was unusual, because Emma fought hairbrushes like they were her natural enemy. Daddy, you look nice. Thanks, baby. You brushed your hair. Aunt Laura FaceTimed me and told me I had to. Of course she did. Daddy is the complicated lady rich. Daniel crouched down. Why do you ask? Because Tommy at school said rich people have gold toilets. Tommy at school needs to stop watching so much television. Does she have a gold toilet? I don't know. I haven't checked. Can I check? Absolutely not. They drove into Manhattan. Emma sat in the back seat with her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunk, and a Ziploc bag full of volcano facts she had written on index cards because she wanted to educate Victoria. Daddy, what if she doesn't like me? Everyone likes you, Emma. Not everyone. Tommy doesn't like me. Tommy pulls your hair because he doesn't know how to express emotions. That's different. What if she's mean? Daniel looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She's not mean. She's just been alone for a long time. And sometimes when people are alone for too long, they forget how to be warm. But that doesn't mean the warmth isn't there. It just means nobody's given them a reason to show it. Emma thought about this. Like Mr. Arthur's car. It didn't start because nobody drove it for a long time, but the engine was still good inside. Daniel smiled. Exactly like that. They parked not 3 blocks away this time, but in the building's garage. Victoria had texted him the code. Daniel entered it and felt strange about the fact that a billionaire had given him her parking garage code. They took the elevator up. Emma held his hand and stared at the numbers climbing. Daddy, this elevator goes really high. It does. What if it breaks? It won't break. But what if it does? Then I'll fix it. That's what I do. Emma squeezed his hand tighter. The doors opened. Victoria was standing in the hallway. She had changed out of her usual armor. No power suit, no heels. She was wearing a simple black sweater and pants. Her hair was down the first time Daniel had seen it down. She looked younger, softer, and unmistakably terrified. Hi, she said. Hi, Daniel said. Emma looked up at Victoria. Victoria looked down at Emma. 2 people separated by 41 years, $4 billion, and completely different universes, staring at each other in a hallway. You're tall, Emma said. You're short, Victoria said. I'm 7. I'm supposed to be short. Fair point. Emma held up the Ziploc bag. I brought volcano facts. Do you want to hear them? Victoria glanced at Daniel. He gave her a look that said, say yes. I would love to hear volcano facts, Victoria said. Emma beamed and walked straight past Victoria into the penthouse like she owned it. Daniel looked at Victoria. You okay? She just walked into my apartment like a tiny general. She gets that from her mother. They followed Emma inside. Victoria had prepared dinner, or rather she had attempted to prepare dinner. The kitchen showed evidence of a battle fought and mostly lost. There were pans on every burner, a cutting board covered in unevenly chopped vegetables, and a slight smell of something that had been burned and hastily scraped into the garbage. "I made chicken," Victoria said. "Or I tried to make chicken. I haven't cooked in a very long time." "How long?" 11 years. 11 years. I have a chef who comes 3 times a week. Or I did. I told him not to come tonight." "Why?" "Because I wanted to do this myself. I wanted it to be real." Daniel looked at the kitchen, at the mess, at the effort. "It's real," he said. Emma had already found the living room and was pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows staring at the city below. "Daddy, I can see everything. I can see the whole world. That's Manhattan, baby. It's not the whole world." "It looks like the whole world." Victoria stood beside Emma at the window. The two of them stood there, the billionaire and the 7-year-old, looking at the same city from the same height, seeing entirely different things. "Do you live here all by yourself?" Emma asked. "Yes." "Don't you get lonely?" Victoria's face changed, a small crack in the surface, the kind only a child's honesty could create. "Sometimes. When I get lonely, I talk to Mr. Trunk." Emma held up the stuffed elephant. "He's a good listener." "I don't have a Mr. Trunk." "You can borrow him, but only for tonight. He has to come home with me." Victoria took the stuffed elephant. She held it awkwardly, like someone who had never held a stuffed animal in her life, which Daniel realized might actually be true. "Thank you, Emma." "You're welcome. Now, do you want to hear about Yellowstone?" "Tell me everything." Emma launched into a detailed and wildly inaccurate explanation of supervolcanoes that involved lava-eating buildings, dinosaurs, somehow being involved, and Tommy at school being wrong about almost everything. Victoria listened to every word. Not the way she listened in boardrooms, analytical, searching for flaws, waiting for the useful information. She listened the way Daniel had never seen her listen to anyone, with patience, with attention, with something that looked dangerously close to joy. Dinner was served, the chicken was dry, the vegetables were overcooked, the rice was slightly crunchy on one side and slightly mushy on the other. It was by any objective measure a mediocre meal. Emma ate every bite. "This is good," she said, her mouth full. "You don't have to say that," Victoria said. "My mommy always said you should say nice things about food that someone made for you because it means they tried." Victoria set down her fork. "Your mommy sounds like she was very smart." "She was the smartest. Daddy says she was smarter than him." "That's true," Daniel said. "Daddy was mommy smarter than Victoria." Daniel and Victoria locked eyes across the table. "They're different kinds of smart," Daniel said carefully. "What kind of smart is Victoria? The kind that builds things. What kind of smart was Mommy? The kind that understood people." Emma considered this. "I want to be both kinds." "Then you will be," Victoria said. After dinner, Emma asked to see the rest of the apartment. Victoria gave her a tour, which mostly consisted of Emma running from room to room and declaring her opinions. "This room is too empty. This bathroom is bigger than my bedroom. Why do you have so many books? Have you read all of them?" "Most of them," Victoria said. "Which one is your favorite?" Victoria paused. "I don't think anyone has ever asked me that." "Well, I'm asking." Victoria walked to a bookshelf and pulled out a worn paperback. The cover was creased and the spine was cracked. "This one, A Wrinkle in Time. My mother gave it to me when I was about your age." "What's it about?" "A girl who travels across the universe to save her father." "Is it scary?" "Parts of it. But the girl is brave." "Can I borrow it?" Victoria held the book for a moment. Then she handed it to Emma. "Keep it." "Are you sure you said it was from your mother?" "I'm sure. Books are meant to be read, not kept on shelves." Emma clutched the book to her chest. "Thank you, Victoria." "You're welcome, Emma." Daniel watched this from the doorway. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Something was happening between his daughter and this woman that he couldn't engineer or explain. Something organic, something real. Emma found the chocolate cake on the kitchen counter. Victoria had bought it from a bakery as instructed and declared it the best cake in the universe. She ate 2 pieces. She got chocolate on her dress, on her hands, on her face, and somehow on Mr. Trunk's left ear. Victoria handed her napkins. Lots of napkins. "You weren't kidding about the mess," Victoria said to Daniel. "I warned you." "You understated." At 8:30, Emma started yawning. The sugar crash was coming. Daniel recognized the signs, the slower movements, the heavy eyelids, the way she started leaning against whatever was closest. She leaned against Victoria. Victoria froze. It was a small moment. A 7-year-old girl, tired and full of chocolate cake, leaning against the arm of a woman who hadn't been touched with affection in years. But it hit Victoria like a wave she hadn't seen coming. She looked at Daniel. He nodded. Slowly, carefully, Victoria put her arm around Emma's shoulders. Not tight, not possessive, just present. The way you hold something fragile that you're afraid of breaking. "Daddy," Emma mumbled, "can we come back? If Victoria wants us to." "Victoria, do you want us to come back?" Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes told a different story. "Yes, Emma, I want you to come back." "Good. Next time I'll bring more volcano facts." "I can't wait." Emma fell asleep on the couch 10 minutes later, curled up with Mr. Trunk and Victoria's copy of A Wrinkle in Time. Daniel and Victoria sat at the kitchen table. The dishes were piled in the sink. The remains of the chocolate cake sat between them. The city hummed outside the windows. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said. "She's her mother. She's you too, Daniel. She has your honesty, your directness, the way she looks at people and says exactly what she sees. That's you." "I think that's just being 7. No, I've met adults who can't do what she does. She walked into a stranger's home, made herself comfortable, asked real questions, and told me the truth about my cooking without hesitation. That's not age, that's character." Daniel looked at his sleeping daughter. "She asked me last week if I was happy. 7 years old, and she's checking on her father's emotional well-being." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was working on it." I'm here, aren't I?" Victoria traced a pattern on the table with her finger. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. You've been saying that a lot lately. Because I've been holding a lot inside for a long time, and apparently you're the person I've decided to unload on." "Go ahead." After the divorce, I told myself I would never put myself in that position again. I would never let someone close enough to see the parts of me that aren't impressive, the messy parts, the uncertain parts, the parts that don't know the answer. Everyone has those parts. But not everyone has built an entire identity around pretending they don't. I am Victoria Sterling, the Iron Queen, the woman who never loses. And every single day I get up and perform that role perfectly. And every single night I come home and sit in this apartment and wonder if there's anything underneath the performance. There is. How do you know? Because tonight you burned chicken for a 7-year-old girl. You gave her your mother's book. You let her lean on you. That's not a performance. That's the person underneath. Victoria's eyes glistened. "Daniel, I'm going to say something, and I need you to not say anything back. I just need you to hear it." "Okay. I'm falling for you. I don't know when it started. Maybe at the gala when you told me I looked tired. Maybe in my office when you found the pattern no one else could see. Maybe at the diner when you paid for my cheeseburger, and I realized nobody had done something that simple for me in years." She paused. "I know this doesn't make sense. I know we come from different worlds. I know that the newspapers will call you a gold digger and call me desperate. I know that Margaret Ashford and every person who put us together at that table will have something cruel to say. And I know that your wife Sarah will always be the most important person in your story." She looked at him. "But I need you to know that for the first time in my life, I don't want to win. I don't want to strategize. I don't want to calculate. I just want to sit at this table with chocolate cake crumbs on it and tell you the truth. And the truth is that you make me feel like a real person, not a CEO, not a billionaire, a person. And I haven't felt like a person in so long that I forgot what it was like." She stopped. The apartment was quiet. The city moved outside. Daniel sat very still. He had promised not to say anything, so he didn't. Instead, he reached across the table and took her hand. He held it. Not like a businessman shaking on a deal. Not like a stranger offering comfort. He held it like a man who understood exactly what it cost her to say what she just said, because he knew what it cost him to feel what he was feeling. They sat like that for a long time. Finally, Daniel spoke. "I'm not going to say I love you. Not yet, because I don't throw that word around. The last person I said it to is sleeping on your couch, and the person before that is gone. So that word means everything to me, and I'm not going to use it until I'm sure." Victoria nodded. "But I will say this. You're the first person since Sarah who made me want tomorrow to be different from today. And for a man who spent 3 years praying for every day to just be the same routine, the same safety, the same numbness, wanting something different is the scariest and best thing I've felt in a long time." Victoria squeezed his hand. "That's enough," she said. "That's more than enough." They cleaned the kitchen together. Victoria washed. Daniel dried. Neither of them had done this before this ordinary domestic act with another person in years, and neither of them mentioned it. But it mattered. The way small things matter. The way standing next to someone at a sink full of soapy water can feel more intimate than a boardroom full of billion-dollar decisions. Daniel carried Emma to the truck. She didn't wake up. She held Mr. Trunk in one hand and the book in the other. Victoria walked them to the parking garage elevator. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Thank you for the chicken, even if it was dry. It was terrible. It was perfect." Victoria watched the elevator doors close. She stood in the garage for a full minute after they left, alone with the echo of the elevator and the distant hum of the city above her. Then she went back upstairs. She washed the last dish, Emma's plate, the one with the chocolate cake smears. She dried it. She set it in the cabinet with the others. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there in Queens, a man in a 20-year-old truck was driving home with a sleeping girl in the back seat. A man who fixed broken things. A man who looked at the most powerful woman in New York and saw something nobody else bothered to see. A person. Victoria pressed her hand against the glass. "I'm not going to ruin this," she said out loud. "Not this time." The next morning her phone rang at 7 a.m. She expected Daniel. She hoped for Daniel. It was Marcus Webb, head of IT security, the one person in the building she still trusted. "Victoria, we have a situation." "What kind of situation?" "Richard Calloway held a press conference last night, midnight. He went to Bloomberg, CNBC, and the Wall Street Journal." Victoria sat up in bed. "What did he say?" "He's claiming wrongful termination. He's saying you fabricated the evidence against him to eliminate a rival. And he's threatening to file a lawsuit, not just against the company, but against you personally." Victoria closed her eyes. "What else?" "He named Daniel." Everything inside Victoria went cold. "What do you mean he named Daniel?" "He told the press that you've been receiving strategic counsel from an unqualified civilian, a mechanic with no financial background, and that your reliance on this person demonstrates impaired judgment. He's framing it as evidence that you're unfit to lead." Victoria got out of bed. "He's trying to humiliate me by humiliating Daniel." "That's exactly what he's doing, and Victoria, the press is going to run with this. A billionaire CEO taking advice from a mechanic, that's a headline they can't resist." "Get legal on the phone, now." "And Marcus." "Yeah. Find out how Richard knew about Daniel. I told the board. Claire is gone. The only people who knew were in that boardroom." "You think someone on the board leaked it?" "I think someone on the board still works for Richard, and I need to know who before this gets worse." She hung up and immediately called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Good morning." "Daniel, listen to me carefully. Richard went to the press last night. He's claiming I fabricated the evidence, and he mentioned you." Silence. "Mentioned me how?" "He told them I've been taking advice from a mechanic. He's using you to make me look incompetent." Victoria. I know. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I brought you into my world, and now my world is going to come after you." Victoria, stop. "What?" "Stop panicking. Think." "I am thinking." "No, you're reacting. That's different. You taught me that. In your office. When you told me that Richard wanted you to react so he could use your reaction against you. He's doing the same thing now. He wants you angry. He wants you defensive. He wants you to scramble." Victoria gripped the phone. "Then what do I do?" "You let him talk. You let the press run the story. And then you tell the truth." "The truth." "The truth. That a mechanic from Queens found something that a $1,200 an hour legal team couldn't find. That a man with no financial training identified a pattern that your entire executive team missed. That's not impaired judgment. That's the opposite. That's someone smart enough to look beyond the usual sources. Let the press report that a mechanic saved your company. Don't run from it. Own it." Victoria was quiet for 10 seconds. "You want me to use the mechanic story as a strength?" "I want you to tell people what actually happened. Richard altered documents. Your CFO betrayed you. And the person who caught it wasn't a Harvard MBA, it was a guy who fixes engines. That's not embarrassing. That's powerful. That's a story people root for." Victoria closed her eyes. "When did you get so good at this?" "I'm not good at this. I'm good at the truth. The truth is simple. It's the lies that are complicated." Victoria took a deep breath. Daniel, if I do this, if I go public with the full story, they're going to come after you. Reporters, cameras, people digging into your life, your military record. Emma, I know. Are you okay with that? Daniel thought about Emma, about her school, about the quiet life he had built to protect her, about the walls he had put up to keep the world from reaching in. No, he said, I'm not okay with it, but I'm also not okay with hiding while someone tries to destroy you for doing the right thing. So we deal with it. Together. 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 Victoria hung up and stood in the middle of her bedroom. The penthouse was silent around her. The city moved outside like it always did, indifferent, relentless, uncaring. But for the first time in her life, Victoria Sterling didn't feel alone in it. She picked up the phone and called her lawyer. Set up a press conference, Monday morning, Sterling Tower. I'm going to tell them everything. She hung up. Then she looked at the kitchen cabinet where Emma's plate was stored, the small one with the chocolate smears she had scrubbed away. She opened the cabinet and touched the plate. I'm not going to ruin this, she said again. And this time, she believed it. The press conference was standing room only. Every major outlet in New York sent cameras. Bloomberg, CNBC, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, CNN. Reporters packed the lobby of Sterling Tower on Monday morning, and the noise of their voices echoed off the marble walls like a courtroom before the verdict. Victoria stood in her office on the 57th floor, looking down at the street where satellite trucks were parked bumper to bumper. Daniel was with her. He had driven into Manhattan at 5 in the morning. Laura had taken Emma to school with strict instructions not to turn on the television. He stood beside Victoria now, wearing the same blue shirt Sarah had given him, the one he had worn to dinner on Saturday. He hadn't bought a new one. He hadn't tried to look like someone he wasn't. You don't have to be here, Victoria said. I know. If you stand next to me down there, your face is going to be on every news channel in America by lunch. I know. Emma's going to see it. Laura's going to make sure she doesn't, not until I'm ready to explain it to her myself. Victoria turned from the window. Daniel, this is the moment where you can walk away. No one would blame you. You didn't sign up for this. You came to a charity dinner because your sister guilted you into it. You helped me because you're a good man. But this camera's reporters your name in headlines. This isn't your fight. Daniel looked at her. You remember what you told me that night at the gala when I asked you if you always win? I said yes. Well, this is me telling you that I don't always win. I don't always have the right words. I don't always know what I'm doing. But I show up. That's what I do. I showed up for my wife when she was sick. I showed up for my daughter every single day since. And I'm showing up for you now. Not because you need saving. Because you shouldn't have to stand down there alone. Victoria's eyes were bright. She blinked hard. Okay, she said. Okay. They took the elevator down together. The doors opened to a wall of noise, questions shouted before they even stepped into the lobby, cameras flashing, microphones pushed forward. Victoria walked to the podium. Daniel stood 3 steps behind her and to the right, close enough to be seen, far enough to make clear this was her moment. Victoria adjusted the microphone. Thank you all for coming. I'll make a statement and then I'll take questions. The room went quiet. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that 2 senior executives at Sterling Industries had been working to sabotage a major acquisition and ultimately to remove me from leadership of the company I built. Richard Callaway, my former chief financial officer, and David Chen, my former vice president of strategic planning, altered financial documents, manipulated board proceedings, and placed a loyalist on our board of directors to engineer a hostile restructuring. She paused. The evidence has been turned over to our legal team and to the appropriate authorities. Both individuals have been terminated. The board has unanimously reaffirmed my position as CEO. A reporter shouted from the second row. Ms. Sterling, Richard Callaway claims you fabricated this evidence. He says you relied on an unqualified civilian, a car mechanic, for strategic counsel. Can you address that? Victoria didn't flinch. I can. The person Richard Callaway is referring to is Daniel Hayes. He's standing right behind me. Daniel is a mechanic. He owns a repair shop in Queens. He's a veteran. He's a single father. And he is the person who identified the discrepancies in our financial documents that my entire executive team missed. The room erupted with questions. Victoria raised her hand. I'm not finished. Richard Callaway wants you to believe that taking counsel from someone outside the corporate world is a sign of impaired judgment. I want you to consider the alternative. For 14 months, I relied on executives with Ivy League degrees and decades of Wall Street experience. And in those 14 months, not one of them found what Daniel found in less than 60 seconds. Not because they weren't smart enough, because they weren't looking. They were too close, too comfortable, too invested in protecting the system that was protecting them. She looked directly into the cameras. Daniel Hayes has no financial training. He has no corporate experience. What he has is clarity. He looks at things the way they actually are, not the way people want him to see them. And in my experience, that quality is rarer and more valuable than any MBA. A reporter from the Times stood up. "Ms. Sterling, what is your personal relationship with Mr. Hayes?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "Daniel is someone I care about. The nature of our personal relationship is not relevant to the corporate matter at hand. What is relevant is that he saw what others couldn't, and his insight saved this company from an internal attack that would have cost shareholders billions." She straightened her jacket. "Richard Callaway spent 12 years inside this company. He had access, authority, and trust, and he used all three to try to destroy what I built. The man standing behind me had none of those things. He had a pair of fresh eyes and the courage to tell me the truth. I'll let you decide which one demonstrated better judgment." She stepped back from the podium. The room exploded with questions, but Victoria didn't take them. She turned, nodded to Daniel, and they walked together through the lobby, past the cameras, past the shouting reporters, and into the private elevator. The doors closed. Silence. Victoria leaned against the wall and exhaled. "How was that?" she asked. "You didn't smile. Was I supposed to—" "No, I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm okay." "Good." She looked at him. "Daniel." "Yeah. I think I just told the entire country that I care about a mechanic from Queens." "I think you did. Are you angry?" "I'm proud of you." Victoria's composure cracked. Just a fraction. Just enough for him to see the woman underneath the armor. "Nobody's ever said that to me before." "Then the people around you haven't been paying attention." The story ran on every news network by noon. By evening, it was everywhere: social media, talk shows, podcasts. The headline writers couldn't resist. "Billionaire CEO credits mechanic with saving company." "The Iron Queen and the Man from Queens." "Victoria Sterling defends mystery advisor." Richard Callaway's lawsuit collapsed within a week. The evidence was overwhelming. The system logs, the timestamps, the documented trail of sabotage. It was airtight. His attorneys quietly withdrew the suit. Patricia Wolf resigned from the board. David Chen disappeared into the kind of silence that follows a man who backed the wrong horse. But the story that captured the country wasn't the corporate scandal. It was them. The billionaire and the mechanic. The woman who had everything except someone to call at the end of the day, and the man who had nothing except a daughter, a shop, and the kind of integrity that couldn't be bought. People loved it. Not the gossip columnists, not the tabloids. Real people, regular people. People who had been overlooked and underestimated their entire lives saw something in Daniel Hayes that made them feel seen. And people who had built walls around themselves the way Victoria had, people who had traded connection for success and wondered if the deal was worth it, saw something in her that made them wonder if it wasn't too late to change. 6 months later, Victoria created the Sterling Foundation. Not the kind of foundation billionaires create for tax purposes and photo opportunities. A real one. Programs for single parents trying to keep their families together. Job training for veterans coming home to a world that didn't know what to do with them. Grants for small business owners like Daniel people who kept their communities running on sweat and stubbornness. Daniel kept his shop. He still fixed cars. He still charged Rosa half price. He still rebuilt Arthur's Chevelle, which finally turned over one cold morning in December, the engine catching and holding a sound like a heartbeat coming back to life. Arthur sat in the driver's seat and cried. Daniel stood beside him with a shop rag in his hand and didn't say a word. Emma turned 8. She had a birthday party at Victoria's penthouse. 7 kids from her school running through rooms that had never heard the sound of children laughing. Victoria stood in the kitchen covered in frosting from a cake she had baked herself, her 3rd attempt and the first one that was actually edible, and watched Emma blow out the candles. "What did you wish for?" Victoria asked. "I can't tell you. If I tell you, it won't come true." "That's fair." Emma looked up at her. "But I'll give you a hint. It already came true." Victoria looked across the room at Daniel. He was helping a kid named Tommy untangle himself from a streamer. Tommy the same. Tommy, who pulled Emma's hair and declared facts about volcanoes, had somehow wrapped himself around a chair. Daniel caught Victoria's eye and shrugged. Victoria laughed. A year after the gala, on a Saturday morning in October, Daniel drove to Sterling Tower. Not for a crisis. Not for a meeting. Not because someone was trying to destroy Victoria's company. He parked in the garage using the code she had given him. He took the elevator to the 57th floor. He walked past the desk where Claire used to sit. There was a new assistant, now a young man named James, who smiled too much and made excellent coffee. He walked into Victoria's office. She was standing by the window looking at the city. "I need to tell you something," he said. She turned. "You look serious." "I am serious." "Should I sit down?" "You can stand. This won't take long." Daniel took a breath. "I told you once that I don't throw the word love around, that the last person I said it to was Sarah, and that I wouldn't say it until I was sure." Victoria's hands gripped the edge of her desk. "I'm sure." "I didn't say the words. He didn't need to." The way he looked at her said everything that language couldn't hold. Victoria crossed the room. She stood in front of him, this woman who had negotiated with senators and stared down hostile boards and rebuilt empires, and she was shaking. "Say it," she whispered. "I love you, Victoria." She put her hands on his face. "I love you too, and it terrifies me." "Good. It should. The things that matter most are always terrifying." That evening they had dinner at Joe's Diner. The three of them, Daniel, Victoria, and Emma. Same booth, same cheeseburgers, same waitress named Linda, who called everyone Hun. Emma sat between them eating fries and reading A Wrinkle in Time for the 4th time. "Victoria," Emma said without looking up from the book. "Yes." "Are you going to marry my daddy?" Daniel choked on his coffee. Victoria didn't miss a beat. "Would that be okay with you?" Emma turned a page. "Only if you promise to make chocolate cake at least once a month." "I promise. And you have to let me borrow more books." "Done. And you have to come to my volcano presentation at school next Thursday." "I'll be there." Emma looked up from the book and grinned. "Then it's okay with me." Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Victoria, then at the diner around them, the cracked vinyl seats, the counter where a man was reading a newspaper, the smell of coffee and grease, and something that felt more like home than any penthouse ever could. "The funniest part," he said, "is that those people at the gala thought they were playing a joke on us." Victoria picked up a fry. "They were right about one thing. We are completely different. You had everything except happiness. You had little except love. And somehow, we gave each other what we were missing." Emma turned another page. "You guys are being weird again," she said. Daniel laughed. Victoria laughed. Linda refilled their coffees and told them they were the cutest family she'd ever served, and Emma informed her that Yellowstone could erupt at any moment and destroy civilization. Outside Manhattan moved the way. It always moved fast, loud and different. A city of 8 million people all chasing something they couldn't name. But inside that booth, 3 people had stopped chasing. A billionaire who learned that the most valuable thing she would ever own couldn't be bought. A mechanic who learned that fixing someone else's broken pieces was the same thing as healing his own. And a 7-year-old girl with a stuffed elephant, and a book about a girl who crossed the universe to find her father who had known the truth all along. That love is not a weakness. It is the only thing that has ever made any of us strong.